Ridge Wallet are back with their third annual Hennessy sweepstakes, giving you the chance to win a Ford Bronco or 75 grand in cold hard cash. They're sponsoring this video, so click the link below to be in the running or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Immortals of Aveum. No one really expected much from this one, did they? I mean, it's tough to be an okay game in 2023. They're just getting squeezed into obscurity by AAA banger after AAA banger. Oh, what's that? You just dropped 150 hours into Baldur's Gate and you're looking forward to some gaming downtime? Well, say hello to my little friend, FromSoft. They have something coming out this week. Fancy a 200-hour trip to the stars after that? Bethesda's got you covered. Fighting game fan? Mortal Kombat arrives just about the same time you might be done exploring the far reaches of Todd's black holes. Oh, and then there's The Lies of P, and Cyberpunk, and Assassin's Creed, and Forza, and Spider-Man, and on and on and on it goes. There is almost no end to the number of marquee titles dropping in 2023. How on earth then do you make time for Immortals of Aveum, a game that's pretty good, but not great? Where does that slot into your budget? Either your wallet budget or your time budget, because Lord knows most of these games demand a hell of a lot more hours than they do dollars. I will tell you how you fit it in, and it is the central thesis of this review. Immortals of Aveum is a pretty good game, but it's a really great palate cleanser. Right now, we are all playing or eyeing these massive RPGs, or these really hard mech games, or fighting games, or fucking live services, or whatever. Immortals of Aveum is like a movie night where you just say, fuck it, and you cancel your plans with your friends, and you eat pizza, and you rewatch Iron Man for the 18th time. And I name Iron Man there very deliberately because Immortals of Aveum has a lot of MCU energy. This feels more MCU than even Insomniac's Spider-Man game or Eidos Montreal's Guardians of the Galaxy. There is a schlocky, silly, over-the-top, sometimes cringy, often ridiculous quality to this that makes it feel more hammed up than those actual Marvel games ever were. The whole of Immortals of Aveum is like the third act of a Marvel movie. Big explosions, CG nonsense, breakneck pace, credits roll, and at that point you can sit back and be like, did I like that? I suspect that many people won't like this. I suspect many will find its action a little one-note, its visuals a little garish, its story is a little unwieldy, and its characters are a little, cringe. But I suspect just as many people will enjoy it for all of those things. Sometimes it's nice to play a dumb shooty game that doesn't ask much of you, and this is absolutely that. Sometimes it's nice to soak up big shiny visuals and be dazzled by an endless cannonade of particle effects, and this is absolutely that. Sometimes it's fun to laugh along with dialogue that is clearly not trying to take itself too seriously, to laugh at the jokes rather than with them, knowing full well that the writers are probably doing the same thing. If you've come here wondering if Immortals of Aveum is a must-play, the answer is absolutely not. But if you had a genuine interest to just learn what the deal is, then I'm here to tell you that this is pretty good. There are some issues with low-end PC performance, which we'll talk about, but outside of that, it's a really well-made game that feels quite unusual. It's a new IP, it's spell slinging, it's big AAA production values for a 12-hour offline single-player game with no microtransactions, published by Electronic Arts. This thing is weird, man, but it is good, it is. And if it hits for you at the right time, like it did for me, then I think it's gonna hit right, and you're gonna be really glad that you played it.
Don't turn your back on me!
Immortals of Aveum tells the story of Jack, a street urchin trying to scratch out a living in the war-torn world of Aveum. And I mean literally war-torn, because the ever-war that stretched on for time immemorial has claimed not only millions of lives, but also huge stretches of territory as the world itself buckles under the weight of this increasingly destructive conflict. Jack's story is often predictable, but it's rarely boring. He discovers his powers in a moment of loss, and from then on he swears vengeance, joining to fight in a war that he had once thought was just for suckers. Training him is Kirkin, a Grand Magi played by none other than the legendary Gina Taurus. She's never turned in a bad performance, and it is no different here. God damn, I miss her as Ikora. Why did she have to leave us? Anyway, Jack's training reveals him to be a Triarch, an anomaly capable of controlling all three schools of magic, blue, green, and red. And armed with this power, he takes his place in the elite order known as the Immortals, those who serve as the tip of the spear in this unending war. There, Jack meets his field commander and powerlifting enthusiast, Zendara, as well as Devon, whose tactical genius is matched only by his lethality on the battlefield and his constant jokes. Their foe is Sandrak, who leads the Rashan Empire. They are the capital B bad guys, and I don't want to spoil anything here, but this is not a straight up good versus evil story. It's very allegorical, a clear commentary on the impact that humans have on their environment as they pursue progress or conflict. It's morally grey, painting a nuanced picture of both friend and foe that forces you to really wonder who the actual villains might be. It's also full of intrigue, dishing out plenty of predictable curveballs, sure, but also some unpredictable ones that really threw me and that made me go, huh, okay. It was so good that I ended up Googling who wrote this, and it turns out it's written by a guy named Michael Kirkbride, who before this worked on the Elder Scrolls series. He worked on Daggerfall, and he wrote the stories for Morrowind and Oblivion. He's also the person credited with codifying a lot of the Elder Scrolls lore and turning it into something cohesive. That's a pretty fucking cool CV right there, and I will tell you that I was regularly surprised at how deep and fleshed out this world is. Aveum is a land of fallen empires, of magical deities silently weighing judgment on the world and its people, of ley lines that pump magic across the world like arteries, of ancient orders and hidden civilizations, and so much more. It's really dense, and while not all of it lands, it does combine to make Aveum feel like a world worth paying attention to. So we've got this interesting and thematic plot, we've got this very deep, lore-rich world, but over the top of that is dialogue like this.
You weren't here for my speech to the selection candidates, Initiate, so I'll give you the short version.
So, it is happening?
Shut up. Welcome to the path. Stepping through that door means you think your magic is strong enough to issue a challenge to the Pentagon. That you fear no judgment or censure for doing so, and that your life word to the ley lines is forfeit if you're found wanting.
The really short version? Don't fuck up in there or you're... Like, for real? More like absorbed into the path and removed from existence. But don't sweat it. I believe in you. She definitely thinks you're going to die. That's why her face looks like that. But don't let it shake you. And anyways, optimism is a moral imperative.
So look, a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at that and trot out the old refrain, Joss Whedon ruined writing. It's the sort of writing that always wants to crack a joke even when the fate of the world hangs in the balance. This game is absolutely that. There are very few scenes that don't at some point have some sort of wisecrack in them. And that's because most of the supporting cast are actually kind of set up as comic relief. Immortals of Aveum feels a lot like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, so if you aren't up for that, then yeah, you are not going to like this. As I played through it, I kind of seesawed back and forth on all of it, and I was like, is this cringe? Is this actually funny? Do the jokes distract from the stakes? Do I like this? In the end, I decided that I did like it, and I'll tell you why. Earlier this year, Forspoken came out, and everyone dunked on that game for its dialogue. Lots of Twitter discourse, YouTube videos, articles written, etc. The most interesting thing I read about Forspoken was from a guy called Austin Walker, who is a game developer now, but he used to write for Waypoint. He penned something on Forspoken titled Post-Cringe, Forspoken and the Self-Sabotage of the Smirking Protagonist. In it, he argues that the worst thing about Forspoken's writing isn't the cringe, it's the fact that the protagonist is cringing at it, since the main character is making all these quips about how dumb this world is that she's found herself in. His thesis was basically, if your main character can't take the world seriously, then why should I? I thought a lot about that article as I played through Immortals of Aveum, because while there's a lot of jokes being thrown around, everyone is all in on this world. Protagonist, supporting cast, NPCs you get the chance to talk to, everyone. It's paradoxical to frame it this way, but even though this game is often not taking things very seriously, it's always taking itself seriously. It's always fully committing to its characters and its gags, and while some of it can come across pretty silly, you end up respecting that the writers and actors leaned into it rather than giving themselves an out by writing in some character or moment that would allow us to sort of look down on all of this. Again, it's just Guardians of the Galaxy. It's earnest silliness. If that appeals to you, like it did for me, then great. But if you're looking for capital C cinema, then Immortals of Aveum certainly is not it. Ultimately, and rather surprisingly, Immortals of Aveum's story, world, and characters really won me over. I started this game thinking to myself that I would have to endure these things, but in the end, they kind of became my favorite part of the package, and I would actually like to see a sequel for this, but I don't know how likely that might be. Immortals of Aveum is among the first crop of games to be releasing on Unreal Engine 5. We had Fortnite, and then Remnant II, and now this, and next month we're going to be getting Lords of the Fallen. Unreal Engine 5 is a big step up in terms of visual fidelity. Textures, meshing, and lighting in particular all look truly next-gen, and Immortals of Aveum absolutely has that next-gen looking quality to it. There's a lot of razzle-dazzle going on here, from the detail in each environment, to the particle effects at work, to the dynamic lighting that kicks in as your spells fly across the battlefield and collide with the target. It's a real technical showcase of the power of Unreal Engine 5 and what it can do. At the same time, I think it's also a reminder that graphics do not make games look good. Art design does that, and Immortals of Aveum really fails to arrive at a unique, cohesive art style that is able to move beyond its gilded halls and sky-high automatons. In my preview, I commented that this game kind of looks like those 3D Mark tech demos that you boot up when you're testing a new GPU, or even those sci-fi alien robot monster things that they always used to put on the boxes of GPUs. It's very shiny, but it never coalesces into something that feels like it has a truly distinct identity. Enemies, for example, they are all these helmeted warriors who may as well be empty suits of armor rather than actual human foes. The overworld you explore seems to have this idyllic Norse mythological architectural thing going on, conjuring up images of Asgard from the Thor movies, but it seems content to just stay at this starting point rather than riff on it to create a more unique sense of place. Internal spaces are basically just stony temples and the like. I had to go back and look through my footage to try to remember something standout, which I think says a lot about how much impact these spaces left on me. Unfortunately, Godfall comes to mind. Not a flattering comparison, and to be clear, this is a much better game than Godfall, but visually, the shininess, the gilded surfaces, the faceless characters, they're all things that these games have in common. There are some big exceptions to this though. At times, the game fully embraces a sense of spectacle and megalomania that is compelling in its own right. This is a world of giant, mechanically powered mechanical colossi, and fighting up and down one as a siege unfolds around you is a thrill, and not a cheap one either, since it wouldn't have been easy for Ascendant Studios to pull this off. These moments are rare though, and for the most part, Immortals of Aveum's impressive technology feels let down by its art direction. That brings us to the question of performance. I tested Immortals of Aveum on 5 machines, believe it or not, and the reason I did this is because the minimum required specs for this are fucking wild. To play it at 1080p, low settings, DLSS on, you will need an RTX 2080 and an AMD 3700. That is crazy, and it's not even native rendering since it demands DLSS set to quality to hit that target 1080p 60 FPS. Or at least it claims to hit those numbers, a point we will definitely come back to. So briefly, I did test this on both the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG Ally. Both are obviously well below minimum spec, but I wanted to see what might happen. On the Steam Deck, the game will boot, but it will hang and crash on the opening menu. On the ROG Ally, it will load, and it will average about 5 to 10 FPS, and then it will crash. Suffice it to say, this game was not intended for handhelds. That's fine, it was never promised to be on handhelds. All good. Now, by chance alone, my main review PC is actually at the minimum specs for this game. It's an RTX 2080 Ti and an AMD 3700X. So I was, for once, uniquely positioned to test how this game performs at the absolute minimum recommended specs. So does this hardware truly deliver on the promised 1080p 60 FPS? The answer is hell no. So this is 1080p, everything's set to low or off, DLSS set to quality, and I'm averaging about 55 FPS if I'm lucky. But even that's not quite true. What you can't see is the 99% value in the NVIDIA overlay, showing that I'm really averaging closer to around 40 FPS, sometimes lower, sometimes significantly lower if it spikes. As a result, it feels so choppy, so sluggish, so unresponsive, and so inconsistent. I would much rather lock in a capped 30 FPS for this, but there is no option to cap FPS, so instead you just get this wildly inconsistent performance that just feels truly awful. I tried to play this game on the 2080 Ti machine, but it honestly felt so bad that I had to abandon it and move over to my 4090. Yes, you can hit the promised 1080p 60 on those minimum specs, but it's basically a lie, and my strong advice to you is that if you are at or anywhere near those minimum specs, do not play this game on PC, get it on console instead if you can. Fortunately, the story on the RTX 4090 is very different. Now, obviously, this is a very powerful and expensive PC, and you may say, well, of course it runs better there, but I would remind you that this year alone, EA has released 2 garbage tier PC ports, Wild Hearts and Jedi Survivor, that didn't run well, no matter how much silicon you threw at them. Immortals of Aveum, on the other hand, runs really well on a high-end machine. On the 4090, playing in what is essentially 4K ultra-wide, ultra settings, I'm usually well clear of 60 FPS without enabling DLSS. You will see a lot of fluctuation, sometimes up to 130 frames, but it almost never goes below that 60, and it feels pretty smooth. Turning DLSS 2 on gives you a nice reliable floor of around 80 FPS, hovering regularly up to about 100. The game also supports DLSS 3, which got me well clear of 120 FPS, though I did notice some glitching in certain locations, so that feature still needs a little more training, I think. I know it's cold comfort to say it runs really well if you have a $6,000 computer, but I'm just telling you how it is. It does work well on high-end machines, it runs like dog shit on low-end PCs. Finally, I got the chance to test this on a PS5, and I was extremely impressed at how well it ran there. The game promises 4K 60 FPS supported by AMD FSR 2. Now, Digital Foundry will of course give us the definitive view on all of this, but from what I saw, that frame rate generally held, except for the odd drop here or there. But I did notice FSR 2 kicking in pretty hard at times, resulting in some degrading of the image. It's minor, especially given how fast all of this moves and how dazzling all the particle effects and such are, but it's definitely a thing you will catch from time to time. So here's the main takeaways on performance. If you have a high-end machine, happy days. If it's low-end, absolutely steer clear. If it's in that 30 series GPU bucket, then I really can't say, but if the high-end performance is anything to go by, you should be okay so long as you tweak the right settings. If you want to skip all of this worrying, then the console versions, at least the PS5 version from my experience, is a really good way to enjoy this and a hell of a lot cheaper than buying a whole new GPU. Outside of performance, I will say that I had 0 bugs the entire playthrough. No audio glitches or gameplay bugs stopping me from progressing, no NPCs bugging out on terrain, nothing. It was a truly watertight experience, very polished, and I think that Ascendant Studios devs should absolutely be congratulated because, yeah, you can really tell they put the work in to test this shit, and the results are very impressive. Alright, so we've talked about setup and story and world and characters, visuals, performance. What the hell are you actually doing in this game? Well, Immortals of Aveum is a broadly linear first-person magic shooty game with some very light puzzle solving and exploration powered by some Metroidvania unlocks. Of the 12 to 15 hour runtime for this game, I'd estimate about a third of that is spent in cutscenes or story moments, a third of that is spent going from place to place through either exploration or puzzle solving, and the final third is all the pew-pew. The puzzle and exploration stuff is fine. Aveum is a semi-open world in that it's divided into major areas accessible by waypoint portals. As you progress through the game, the portals unlock behind you, allowing you to go back to previously visited areas so you can mop up any remaining collectibles, or the combat challenges, which are hidden throughout the world. The overall flow is very similar to God of War Ragnarok actually, but much smaller in scope. These levels are very narrow, they are very linear in their construction rather than encouraging 360-degree exploration. They also have a handful of secrets secreted away, and it's kind of hard to miss them. They present themselves in very obvious ways throughout your journey. At that point, you can either solve them then or there, or if you're missing the necessary upgrades, you can make a mental note of it and come back later. As for what these puzzles are, they're mainly, lighting up the 2 pillars by aligning the lasers, or shooting the 3 hidden panels, or traversing up to some tricky spot to click on a thing. It's always simple, but it's always enjoyable. These are the sorts of environmental puzzles I'd categorize as pacing mechanisms. Since they never provide much of a challenge, they only ever take a minute or two to figure out, and their biggest contribution to the overall game flow is as a punctuation point between intense combat encounters, a sort of line break, giving you a breather before you head into the next breathless combat showdown. And that brings us to the combat. Spell slinging is coming back into vogue, it seems. This year alone, we've had Forspoken and Hogwarts Legacy. There's also been some boomer shooters a little while ago that played in this space. A Medieval and Graven come to mind. It's something that I think developers are always going to come back to at some point, since the fantasy of throwing out a spell is just cool, but trying to deliver on that fantasy is really hard, and it often doesn't feel as satisfying as, say, firing a gun, which is why we get 300 first-person shooters a year and like 3 spell-slinging games. So what's interesting about Immortals of Aveum's developer, Ascendant Studios, is that it was co-founded by Brett Robbins, who earlier in his career was the creative director for Dead Space and more than a few Call of Duty campaigns. You can definitely see that sort of influence in the overall presentation and pacing of this package. Its breakneck pace and set pieces definitely have some of that Call of Duty flair. The core combat also has that, and this is probably the closest that any spell-slinging game has ever felt to a traditional first-person shooter. The way it works is fairly straightforward, but the number of tools at your disposal raises the skill ceiling such that you're going to feel pretty badass if you can get to grips with it all. The foundation is your gauntlet, or gauntlets plural, and luckily they don't talk. The rest of the characters do more than enough talking as it is. It does shoot things though, and the way it shoots things depends on its color. The blue magic is precision based, kind of like a marksman rifle that rewards high accuracy for crit damage. Red magic is your classic shotgun, devastating up close but about as harmless as a Redfall NPC at range. Green magic is your SMG, low damage, high rate of fire with the added bonus of tracking targets, making for a nice crutch to lean on if you're struggling with all the precision requirements of blue magic. These new magic types can be augmented with new gauntlet upgrades. One blue gauntlet may do more damage per spell, but also have increased recoil. One green bracer may focus on rate of fire, while another focuses on the number of spells you can fire before you have to reload. Because yes, you have to reload your hand here, like that time Henry Cavill reloaded his biceps before punching on. The gear system does what it can here, but at no point does combat feel truly great. It is fun and flashy, but the feedback just isn't there. It doesn't feel satisfying enough to land a headshot or to body shot an enemy with a hot dose of red magic. You can unload an entire clip of green magic into an enemy and feel nothing really. It's a combination of enemy ragdolling, sound effects, hit markers, and firing animations. They're all there, but it never feels any more impactful than that finger gun shooting scene from Tales from the Borderlands. The biggest problem are the controls, which are really overstacked. You have 3 gauntlets which you need to cycle between, 4 different abilities that you can use, some of which have different situational use cases that you need to keep track of. You have a dodge, a jump, which can be turned into a hover if you hold it, a melee attack, which can debuff enemies, there's a shield, which does all sorts of things depending on how you use it, there's an ultimate ability, which you can regularly dump for big damage, and on top of all of this, there are 6 castable spells, which each do their own damage-dealing thing in their own way. It's a lot, man, it really is, and while it absolutely increases the skill ceiling of combat, and it can feel really good to use all of this properly, I think it's just too much. The controls buckle under the weight of it all. I had to completely redo the default key bindings on PC to start making use of shift key combinations just so I had enough buttons to press to get everything done. See, the thing is, enemy design is not great. The enemies do not ask you to do anything more than just shoot them with a specific color of spell, breaking their elemental shield or their armor. Because Ascendant did not rely on enemies to make combat deeper and more interesting, all of the new tools that you get feel rather superfluous. I didn't need to use half of what I was given during my playthrough, and even then, the game is extremely easy when playing on normal difficulty. I think I only died twice or maybe 3 times the entire campaign. I'd have much preferred a more simplified control scheme and suite of abilities coupled with deeper, more engaging enemies, rather than just being drowned in new tools that do little more than make the controls feel really crowded. Still, all of this works well enough to carry the game for its 12 to 15 hour duration. The pacing is its saving grace. If this was just a relentless, non-stop action fest, I probably wouldn't be recommending it to you. Played in short, sharp bursts, the combat is fine, and if you're someone who wants to truly master all of these tools on offer, you might find some joy in doing it on that higher difficulty setting. As I've said a few times now, there's definitely something going on over at EA. Their sports business is still a disaster zone of some of the most exploitative monetization you'll find outside of an unlicensed casino, but their single-player, offline, microtransaction-free portfolio continues to go from strength to strength. Star Wars Squadrons, Game of the Year winner It Takes Two. They did a great job on the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. That Dead Space remake was top tier. Wild Hearts and Jedi Survivor were both terrible PC ports, but they were great games. And now we have Immortals of Aveum, a fairly big budget new IP in an era of game making where it's rare for new IPs to get big budgets. Rarer still when it's based on a far-flung, spell-slinging game that's one part Call of Duty, one part Guardians of the Galaxy, and a whole lot of particle effects. I respect EA for putting money behind a new IP, a new studio, making a game that probably isn't going to sell a boatload. Because yeah, Immortals of Aveum is pretty good, but not great. And even in a normal year, that's tough. But in this year, it seems like it might be a death sentence. And I really hope that isn't the case. And that's why I wanted to position this one the way that I did. This is a good game, but it's an excellent chaser after whatever big, massive, sprawling thing you might have just finished, or a nice appetizer before you saddle up for the next big thing. It's kind of dumb and flashy and silly and easy, and it's kind of mindless, but it will also surprise you at times with the depth of its world building, or some of its more audacious spectacle, or a combat encounter where everything just really clicks for you and you're throwing out spells and debuffing enemies and teleporting around the battlefield like it's nobody's business. The highs can be pretty high, and the lows are never really that low. Still, I know budget is very tight with all these games coming out, so do remember that this is available on EA's subscription service at launch, and after a while, it will be on Game Pass. This may not be one you pick up at launch right now at full price with your wallet empty and your schedule full, but when those things level out, this is a good one to come back to, and I think it's going to positively surprise more than a few people, just as it did me. So, I recommend it to you. All right, you got a cool wallet, you got a cool keychain. You know what else you need to go with it? A new car. Yeah, that's how accessorizing works, right? If it sounds ridiculous, then you just haven't heard about this video's sponsor, Ridge Wallet, and their 3rd annual Ford Bronco giveaway, where you can win an actual car. Don't want a car for some reason? How about some cash? $75,000. Could you fit all of that cash into your Ridge Wallet? Unlikely, but I think it'd be cool to try, and you can try for yourself if you are lucky enough to scoop up this prize. By this point, you might already know about Ridge Wallet, but if you don't, then let me tell you, it's the wallet evolved. A fact I can personally attest to, as I've been using Ridge Wallet for many years now, well before they sponsored the channel. Ridge Wallet holds all of your essential cards, plus your cash using the money strap or money clip, and they take up a fraction of the space of the old, bulky leather wallets that you used to use. I really can't imagine going back to one of those, by the way. In addition to that, Ridge Wallets protect you from scammers with RFID protection, plus they come in a range of ultra-durable materials, including titanium. To coincide with their Hennessy Ford Bronco sweepstakes, they've released a limited edition Hennessy-themed wallet and key case. It's got a sleek black finish sporting a very smart orange racing stripe. I like it, but if you don't, then that's cool, because there's a huge selection of colors and styles available, from the popular matte black to red to navy to tons and tons more, really. Just recently, they launched a number of new styles like their Base Camp Orange or this one, Damascus. I've been rocking the North Shore style for over a year now, and I never thought I'd switch off it, but as soon as I cracked open Damascus, I was like, nice. I've now switched over both my wallet and my key case to the Damascus, and they are my daily drivers. Just click the link below and follow your nose. You'll be able to enter the sweepstakes for free. However, you will get one bonus entry for every $1 you spend on the site, and the custom Hennessy products come with up to 1,000 bonus entries. To cap all of this off, if you click that link below and use offer code SKILLUP at checkout, you will get up to 10% off your purchase, no strings attached. If you've ever been considering a Ridge wallet, then now is the best time. That's ridge.com/skillup and use offer code SKILLUP for 10% off. Get yourself a shiny new wallet and maybe a shiny new car to match. Thanks Ridge for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.